Hey, Kevin here, and the CMF Phone 1 is massive! I mean, when I first saw this phone, I was expecting something a little bit smaller, especially with its proportions. But when I took it out of the box and compared it to my S24 Ultra, it's quite large. But you know what they say, size does matter, right? I got that wrong, didn't I?
It's been 1 month since the CMF Phone 1's release, and this phone has been a breath of fresh air in the perpetual world of tech. Especially with every device pretty much just doing the same thing year for year with just minor refinements. You've got Google, Motorola, Samsung. Just minor refinements. The CMF Phone 1 brings not only a new benchmark to a much neglected price bracket at that, but a unique design and experience. But at what cost? Are there any problems?
But before we get into that, let's talk about the positives. After you like and subscribe, of course, because these videos aren't cheap to make and this channel isn't monetized, which means every video we lose money. Help us make this financially feasible by getting us to 1,000 subscribers. Anyway, right back into the video.
The first thing you'll notice about the CMF Phone 1 is obviously the design. Being a sub-brand of nothing, there's nothing to really be surprised about.
Is it polarizing? Yeah. There's been a few comments on both sides, with some saying the Phone 1 looks like an expensive toy, and others say that it really brings out the essence of teenage engineering. We personally find it really refreshing in the boring world of slab phones and quite like the more modular design. But you see, a modular design isn't much of a design language because the new CMF Phone 1 is a really unique phone. Unlike most phones, this phone is screwed, just like me. And with any flathead of your choosing, of course mine's the most appropriate for this procedure, we can very easily take the phone apart. And with all 5 screws removed, the last thing to do is to remove the back panel, which is quite easy because all you gotta do is... oh, almost forgot. Make sure to always remove the SIM card tray when trying to take any phone apart. Talk about SIM card trays, this SIM card tray supports 2 SIM cards, and it also has a little rubber gasket for waterproofing. But the proofing that this phone doesn't have is teardown proofing. And with a simple little persuasion, we can take this, oh my god, we can 5 screws and you can rip that back panel right off, which means you can change the color of your back of your phone, replace the back of your phone, and I'll put a Pokemon card on the back of the phone. Oh, you've already seen this a million times. Okay. But hey, at least you can celebrate the ability to put Macca's hot sauce on the back of your phone. And look, its unique design sticks out like a sore thumb, making it a cheap and easy conversation starter, meaning you can make friends.
Hey, cool phone.
Thanks!
In all seriousness, the idea of being able to customize your phone is wholly unique in the current landscape of smartphones. It's definitely not the first handset to try this whole customize your own device idea, but it's definitely a more successful iteration of the concept. But since it's more aesthetically focused rather than pure functionality, it does miss out on some potential. But hey, no point in pondering what could have been, why not focus on what we do have? Like this built-in Beyblade. Oh my god, that's crazy. Look at that. This could be so cringe.
Irrespective of the glued-in battery, this phone still lasts way more than you would need under normal usage. So by the time you need to replace it, you'd probably replace the whole phone, considering its low price of $199 US. And honestly, with such a low TDP, I do find this thing lasting a lot longer than my S24 Ultra. But do take this with a grain of salt, as the Phone 1 probably doesn't support as many network bands as the Ultra. But in essence, you could say that the battery life is nearly identical. But back on the topic of price. For what you're paying, the phone itself is quite impressive, especially compared to the S24 Ultra. This display is excellent, especially if we compare it to the said Ultra, and it also has really good viewing angles. A high refresh rate of 120 Hz, this thing has it. And on top of that, this display can reach 2000 nits, which is quite close to the S24 Ultra's 2600 nits. This panel literally has more things than most mid-rangers at a higher price compared to the Phone 1. The display panel even has 960Hz PWM, which is double that of the S24 Ultra. Look at this difference, it's huge.
But unfortunately, what's not double are the cameras, or should I say camera? Unless you're counting the selfie camera, of course, but you get my gist.
Starting right off the bat, the CMF phone's color science here looks superior to the Samsung, with the Samsung making the bricks in the middle of the shot look a little bit green.
Moving on to the next photo, we can see that this CMF Phone 1 is actually quite hazy in comparison to the S24. And the Ultra has better HDR.
This next photo here looks like an iPhone versus Samsung shot, with the CMF producing a much more realistic rendition of the photo, where the Samsung has decided to crank the saturation of the sky. And as we expect, the next photo, same story here. CMF, more realistic colors, Samsung, more saturation and more brick detail. Now pushing in on that same photo with 2x digital crop, the Samsung just has more detail. The CMF falls apart and it looks quite blurry. Now moving on to portrait selfies, we can see that the Ultra has a much wider field of view, but the Ultra has blown out the sky. The CMF surprisingly does a little better here. Now flipping around to rear portraits, the CMF Phone 1 doesn't cook much, falling behind the Samsung with too much contrast and poor edge detection. Now we punch into 10x. This isn't even a fair comparison. Punching back into 2x, we can see that the S24 Ultra is still very yellow, while the CMF Phone 1 is a bit soft, so there is still once again more detail in the Samsung. Now moving on to this photo of this flower, the CMF Phone does over sharpen everything, with the Samsung producing an overall better photo. However, the color on the CMF looks better in my opinion here.
Yes, the camera did definitely lose out to the S24, but considering some of these shots did actually come out more preferable for the Phone 1 is extremely impressive for its price point.
However, what isn't impressive is its singular bottom firing speaker. The sound of this is what we would call mid. Literally. Mids. Take a quick listen for yourself. The treble is not great and there's no bass, so it's just all mids. What's also mids are the benchmark scores. But this isn't bad. What we mean is this budget phone competes with mid-range phones a class above. Now obviously it's not going to touch the S24 Ultra. This phone's chip is literally 150% faster in CPU, and for you gamers, it's 420% faster in GPU. But you know what they say, numbers don't mean anything in the real world. Right? At high settings, Honkai Star Rail runs at a whopping 24 to 35 frames per second, which you could say is a cinematic experience. Wait, that's not highest? Okay, let's quickly fix that. Oh god. I guess you can count my frames? It's definitely not unplayable, as Star Rail is a turn-based RPG, and if you really want the 60 frames or above 50 frames being realistic, you just need to set the settings to medium or low, and it's perfectly adequate. Zenless Zone Zero, on the other hand, after it's done all its shader caching, isn't that bad. It's actually quite a playable experience. That is if you lock the frame rate to 30 frames per second, because honestly, a stable 30 is a much better experience than 30, 50, 30, 40, 30, 20, 30, you get the gist. COD Mobile, on the other hand, well, COD Mobile runs on anything, so we didn't even bother testing it. Now, I know what you're asking, but Kevin, how the hell you fit all those games on the phone? 128 gig can't fit Genshin Impact, let alone Honkai Star Rail. Well, glad you asked that question, because unlike all the other companies, the Phone 1 has a micro SD card slot. Yes, you remember the dual SIM card tray? Well, if you get rid of one of your dual SIMs and only have a single SIM, this thing has a micro SD card slot. That means you don't even need to consider the 256 gig model. But anyway, back to the benchmarks. Obviously, they do have a real meaning, unlike those number glazers would tell you. But if numbers do matter, we've got to remember that the S24 Ultra literally costs 4.34779264214 times more than the Phone 1, which in all fairness isn't how much faster it is. So, value for money?
When I tell you this phone's cheap, it is a cheap phone, mate. You're getting the whole package for, guess what, $199 USD. Yes, maybe you get a couple brewskis at the pub, maybe a Jack and Coke, but guess what? It's a whole package, mate. In all seriousness, the Phone 1 has a really polished experience for being one of the cheapest phones on the current day market. And for a fraction of the price of most other high-end phones, you still get a really satisfactory experience. But there's a huge but, something we've avoided completely talking about for this whole video, and the problems, if you will. This phone has no NFC. Yes, this means that there is no way of using your phone for contactless payment. That also means that you can't use your phone as a public transport ticket. And that means that you'll need to whip out that old dusty wallet of yours if you want to pay for anything. Though, if you've got a knack for 3D printing, or have the money to go and get the wallet accessories, technically this can be mitigated.
But still, most phones in this price bracket do have NFC, and on top of that, other phones close to its price have more cameras and generally better build materials, which could be favored over the clean Nothing OS experience. And let's not forget the fact that you can find CMF's parent company's mid-ranger, the Nothing 2A, on the used market for much more of the price of a brand new Phone 1 does put into question the value proposition of the handset. And the 2A, if you've forgotten, has the benefits of the CMF Phone 1 and then some, including NFC, an ultra-wide, better stereo speakers, and better build, all the shortcomings of the aforementioned mid-ranges. But remember, the CMF Phone 1 does have a micro SD card slot, a brighter screen, and if you value those more than cameras and a fancy static build that you can't customize, maybe the Phone 1 is for you, creative-minded folks. Just like this video was made for you to smash that like and subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next video.